All right, welcome back. It's the deep dive. I have AVRL with me this time around. AVRL, I've asked everybody else. I'm going to make you do the same thing. I want you to just describe yourself, if given the chance. Act like this is a resume for your first job.
I'll probably describe myself in nicer ways, and I was gonna be pretty direct about it. I think that's one thing I am. I'm pretty direct. I'm a pretty analytical guy, which is why I do what I do. Um, and I guess that's just like I'm someone that has always had a strong interest in broadcast kind of stuff. It's kind of what I mainly studied tertiary education wise. And I was good at games. I was at least once upon a time good at games, and so kind of combining the two together is how I arrived at casting. So I describe myself as um, a logical, analytical person who can sort of work stuff out quite easily, or maybe easier than some others, and yeah, who is probably in some ways uh, kind of geared towards this kind of analytical type work.
Okay, that's good. That would be a good portion on the resume, I will say. You said you studied this kind of like broadcasting in school. Did you say that? In
Yeah,
New
I mean,
Zealand,
I
I
did.
assume.
Yeah, I did. Uh, it's like a communications degree in New Zealand for all sorts of broadcast stuff. It's the kind of course you take to get into like journalism or other types of media stuff. Like you can work behind camera, you can work in a TV studio kind of deal. Yeah, that kind of field, that area.
Was that in university or was that
It was,
like
yeah.
pre-university? Yeah. All right. Cool. And that, how long did you study for? Because I studied for 4 years. I did a gap year as well. Did you do anything like that?
Yeah, basically, I like kind of swapped between. I used to do like a business that I wasn't a business degree I wasn't interested in anymore. So I think all up I studied like maybe 4 or 5 years, and kind of yeah. Well, university was like a really weird time. I feel like feel like if I was to do it again, obviously like everyone you have this kind of, I wouldn't say regrets, but like you second time around you feel like you probably know what you're doing. First time around I was like kind of floundering a bit. So there's that. It was fun.
I feel like that's everybody, like floundering around. That's exactly what I did. I mean, I don't do games programming anymore. I failed my, well, I didn't fail my gap year, but I did a placement year with my own company and fucked that up. So I think that's every. What would you do second time around then? Would you do the same thing, like communications kind of deal? Or would you do something
I
else?
just probably actually I say second time around. I'm at the position where I wouldn't want, hypothetically, if I was to redo it and I was still like 19, it would just be more about the level of focus and motivation. But I actually wouldn't even go back to uni. I've thought about it a lot. It's like, if all this went under, would I go back to
Yeah.
studying? I was like, probably not. I think I'm way past that now, and there's other things to be focused on. I mean, there's a whole debate on how much X or Y people really need university or need like this kind of institutional education. It really depends on what you want to do. There's just so many people I know who get out of it and don't even end up using their degrees and just completely do other things. That would have been me anyway. I don't think I would have really gone into esports had I gone deeper down that pathway. Whereas like this is more of what I want to do out of passion. So yeah.
Feels like, well, nowadays there might be even esports degrees. People taking degrees in esports, which would be
Please don't.
how
That's
sus
crazy.
would that be? Do you remember the this was what, a couple of years ago now? Was it the certification of esports? Did you ever see that? Where you had to answer
Nope.
questions and get a certificate in esports. I remember me, Bren, Josh, and Connor did it on stream once. Yeah, it was
Oh yeah, yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah, yeah. Now I
The
remember. Yeah,
certification of
that
esports.
that
Yeah,
I can't even remember what that was all about. But
it's
any sort
gone
of that
now.
kind of stuff, I thank God, because yeah, any of that kind of stuff, I just think is almost feels like grifting. I think it's
Oh,
complete trash.
100%.
Like what is it even there for? Like can't learn something that will actually not help you at all. I mean, in some ways it might help you if you have like zero clue about esports, but I don't know. It all feels like grifting. I saw someone. I think it probably was on Twitter because it's usually where I see stuff. Um, get your news from Twitter, people, reliable source. Uh, someone's like got my esports course approved or something. I think it might have been for like a university type
Right,
deal. And I was
right.
like, oh, on one hand, I was like,
Oh.
great, good for you. On the other hand, I'm like, oh no, what is this going to be like? Wincing a little bit, like, oh no.
It feels a bit weird thinking about like people taking a course for esports. I mean, if it was in commentary, I'd be like, okay, sure. Like you can definitely like teach commentary.
Not
But
even in commentary, because like everything that is useful in esports is just real world experience from elsewhere. You want to work on a team, doing marketing, whatever, doing socials, you can learn that elsewhere. There's got nothing to do with it. Well, if you want to work in esports, but it's skills you bring in from outside of esports, business, economics, all that kind of stuff. You want to be a player, no course outside of like an esports coach who's really good at the game, teaching who's going to help you there. Broadcast wise, you want to do production and you want to be a creative or whatever. Like you want to be you want to hold a camera, like all those kind of skills you learn outside. Like you can do the type of degree that I did that can teach you that kind of stuff. Journalism as well. It's like all the stuff you do in esports. I feel like none of it is super specific to esports. Personally, you learn everything, all the skills you need from other areas. So what is the point of an esports course degree?
yeah,
My
it feels
position.
like a production course would be more suited to esports than an esports course, because then at least you can go into production of esports rather than
Exactly.
like something specific
Or any
which would teach
production.
you. Yeah, or any production. Yeah, exactly. It feels a little bit weird. Although a lot of the production people that, or not a lot of, a few of the production people that I know, they've not done a degree in it. They just kind
And
of
that's the other thing. You
were
might not even
helping.
need a degree. You
Yeah,
could probably just do it.
yeah, definitely. You mentioned before one time. This feels like a repeating subject. One time you were good at video games. Want to elaborate? What video games were you good at? Don't say Tribes Ascend. Don't do it.
Team Fortress 2 Ascend was the game I was really good at.
Team Fortress 2
Uh,
Ascend. Okay, okay.
just Team Fortress 2. I'd say it was like the only game I was seriously good at. Um, I played competitively. I was going to use the word pro, but that wouldn't be accurate. None of us were really pros back then. I think pro gaming wasn't really a thing back then. Everyone just kind of played for fun, and bragging rights. I played before
Yeah.
Scott. I played before Custer because we both played in the Australian region. I was just fairly competitive. Like I remember, at its peak, Australia sent a team to one of the Insomnia events, which is
Oh yeah.
basically a
Yeah.
world land for TF2, the only ones that existed. Um, where you'd go up against guys like Seagull and Banny and Pure at the time, where Pure now works at the Overwatch League. Uh, Seagull, huge streamer, and Banny, I think he just still plays TF2. And the Australian team came fourth. It was Immunity. So, yeah, I had some good friends on that team. And some of them ended up becoming Overwatch players eventually. So yeah, I played. How long would I play for? Seriously played. I think I picked up TF2 in about 2007. Started competing in 2008, and would have said I was good between 2010 and it's just so long ago now.
13 years ago. It's a lifetime in
Maybe
esports.
2014. I feel
Right.
because I'm trying to remember what else I did. No, probably about maybe 2010 or 2013 kind of deal. I played at the top level and I was in the mix among the top teams. And I don't think I was ever like in position to be first a lot of times, but I was definitely competing with like the top teams. I could definitely be at least on the second best team, if not competing for a number one spot. But um, lose to super teams. uh, yeah. So that was that time, and I remember like it was hard to mechanically be good as well because you didn't have any aim labs, you didn't have any sort of training custom games. Like even without aim labs in Overwatch, you could just go into some like workshop code and train, and that's just so accessible and easy.
Did you not have
Um,
MG?
that's the thing is MG was the first like quote unquote training, but it wasn't even training. It was just dueling. It was
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
1v1 dueling.
It was good for scouts.
It was good for every role except probably medic.
Yeah.
You just rock up and do 1v1 training there, and that's about it. So, again, it's not even really training. It is training, but it's 1v1 dueling for points. Sometimes there would be like its own ladder in there, so it's a pretty cool system.
Yeah.
And it would develop you good like 1v1 skills. A lot of which could translate into like proper 6v6 gameplay, but obviously there's limits there because there's also team play involved. But it's one of the few ways you could actually get your mechanics improved. But that didn't even MGE wasn't even a thing until, you know, pretty deep into me playing TF2. The first time I saw some guy that was like seriously insane at the game, he actually spammed like custom dueling servers. Like when I say custom, it's just like, I'm gonna load up a game. Who wants to come play? And we'll just spam a bunch of 1v1 duels throughout the day, and that's about it. And so like it was this like dueling before MGE, and that's how he got really mechanically good. I was like, damn, this guy's insane. And so yeah, I practice all the different roles. Professionally, I played medic, so I understand what it's like to be mercy. And even back then, I think like this is where the sort of strategic mindset comes from. It's like my entire framework for how I understand team play strategy, and all that kind of stuff for games comes from my experience leading teams, being an IGL, um, figuring all that kind of stuff out, and just calling how a team should move, where we need to go, what the objectives are, what we need to sort of achieve. Understanding how the entire flow works, and also understanding what the other team's doing as well, like being very perceptive of like how you're understanding the other team's objectives and movement and what they are trying to achieve, and try to counter that at all times. And getting really good at that, like you can just start beating teams on pure macro. And in TF2, I felt like there wasn't a ton of macro compared to much more complex games now, like Overwatch. But even back then, like, understanding map control and how you want to move and the speed that you're moving at and positioning that you need to be taking very early and all that kind of stuff was super important. But it's a very highly mechanical skill ceiling game. So at the end of the day, like I think the teams with like really insane aimers and movers were still much better. In many ways, I still think TF2 is one of the most mechanically difficult games out there that has been out there. When I first played Overwatch, I actually felt like Overwatch dumbed down the mechanics a lot, because like it's a lot of the things, and because let's be straight about it, Overwatch is heavily inspired by TF2. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. It's extremely heavily inspired by TF2. And you can imagine for some guy like me, I was playing professionally medic, but I was pretty good at the other roles. I'd say I could probably play soldier at the time, at like between the divisions. If you imagine the top division of like the best 8 teams in the region, I could play like a soldier role around that kind of level, but maybe at the lower end. So I'll play medic, come to Overwatch, and I was like, oh, there's this mercy character, and here are the differences between medic and mercy in terms of like how much more difficult it is to play medic. There's no GA, so you don't get to just fly around, especially not on a 1-second cooldown. So actually, there's no movement. There's no movement at all. You simply just move, and you're like an average move speed character as the medic. And you don't have another healer on your team, so if you take damage, you're just kind of either jumping for a health pack or slowly regenerating back up, very, very slowly regenerating back up. And you have like an ult, I guess it's called the Uber charge. But when you die, you lose all of it. It's just gone. You actually just lose the entire thing. You start from 0 again. Super punishing if you die. You also only have 150 health, so its TF2 is also very similar in like the 200 base health, and then everybody else is like health depending on that. A medic only has 150 health, when the average health is probably closer to 200. So I mean, you can definitely die in like 2 hits, or what? Well, not quite 1 hit, but like 1 small hit and then 1 like large hit would down you pretty easily. Yeah, you don't have a lot of ways to protect yourself. The gun you have, your Glock is pretty weak. Just this needle gun.
Syringe, yeah, and it's
Yeah, you
it's got
fire syringes.
It's kind of like
It
Mercy's
arcs.
pistol, to be honest. Like
Hmm?
same. It's kind of like Mercy's pistol.
I think Mercy's pistol's way easier because this syringe shooter
Syringe
is like
sucked.
it like arcs, right? It's got this
Yeah.
arc on it, and it fires pretty quickly, but it's just super inaccurate. Like it goes everywhere. Like
Yeah.
to try and actually, because you have to lead targets on. It's got, because of the way the projectile works, you can't just aim somebody and hit them. You like, if they're moving, and they're
Yeah. Good
moving in
luck.
this game because it's an arena shooter. They're 80 spamming you, or they're like crouching, they're moving, and they're jumping. You're not going to hit people because the syringe projectiles just don't have the speed to hit these targets. I don't know. I think Glock is, and they buff the Glock as well. So the point is like just about everything about the medic is way harder than Mercy. So I come over to Overwatch, I'm like, wow, they've made this character insane. And like the difference between the sniper and Widowmaker. Okay, again, I understand Overwatch is a completely different game, but it's just funny. Like when I try and like, even this is maybe not a fair comparison, but like do this 1-to-1. It's just you can start to feel like from my brain how I felt like Overwatch was like a dumbed down TF2. It's like, oh, the sniper character has a hook shot. Like you can just get away. A sniper in TF2, you just die. Like what? Someone sneaks up to you. You have to fight them 1v1 and you die.
Yeah. Some
You
scout
just
runs
pretty
up
much
to
just
you.
die.
GG.
You're gone. You have no. I guess you could pull out the SMG. Not that effective. Can't crit with it. You can't headshot with it. In fact, nothing can really headshot in TF2 except for the sniper. And like one specific gun on the spy. And I think the sniper rifle was even like harder to use because it would show the red dot. So when you aimed at a certain location, it would show everybody on the server, enemies and allies, where you're aiming, because a red dot would show up. Like, let's say you're aiming on a door, there's a dot on the door. You can see this dot on the door, so people know your LOS. So yeah, just a hard game to play, I think. And everyone will be like, yeah, but what about the random weapons? Like, well, the competitive scene never used those. The competitive scene had a whitelist of only like pre-approved stuff, and it was barely anything in the game. So it's a very clean, almost pure version of the game. So, yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I played.
TF2. Well, I mean, like, I think a lot of people started in TF2, at least on the competitive side of things too. Or sorry, on the commentary side of things too. I used to play competitive TF2. Scott did. Mitch did at one point. You know, like not competitive TF2. I don't think with Mitch, but like still played TF2. Hero shooters were like, dude, TF2 was just ahead of its time. It's kind of wild to kind of think back about how crazy,
It birthed the hero
crazy
shooters.
big TF2 is. Yeah, it did.
I think
I
think it basically inspired all hero shooters. It was the first class-based shooter to like essentially have backstory, have lore, and have like some sort of attachment to specific characters. Like there's 9 classes, but they all had these personalities, they all
So
unique,
different.
and because of that, that was the, you know, the first kind of game I would have considered to be close to a hero shooter. Than Overwatch and other hero shooters, other games took that one step beyond afterwards.
Yeah, they really put a lot into the kind of the backstory of a lot of the characters too, which made it quite lovable. I remember watching the Meet Thers so many times. Meet the Snipers, Meet the Scout. Obviously, Scout was my favorite class, but so I like played Scout a lot. So like Meet the Scout was just so funny to me. Obviously, I was a teenager back then, but like, you know, it's still really funny. You go back and watch it, it's still like, it's kind of timeless comedy.
Well, yeah, they do the shorts as well, and then you know I feel like to some degree Overwatch's shorts are kind of inspired by that, not on a 1-to-1 level, but like, hey, shorts was obviously a thing that kind of took off with TF2. Our game is like kind of TF2, you know. Shorts, we can do better shorts because like Blizzard cinematics are like S tier, so
unreal. Yeah. I mean,
it's just
the
straightforward.
shorts for Overwatch are like some of the best bits of gaming media out there. Like people love the shorts. Like the Kiriko short for me, when we saw that for the first time, I was like, oh my god! Like I love the cyberpunky kind of feel to a lot of gaming and stuff like that. I love like cyberpunk and shit. And Kiriko felt like a little bit like that. I don't know, especially with like the music and everything. And it was like, man, this is fucking awesome. And I don't normally get like super hyped about trailers or anything. I'm just apart from like cyberpunk, but like, you know, I was like, god damn, this is sick. And then it definitely brought out a different emotion than I did when I watched like the TF2 shorts, for sure. Just because of, like you said, Blizzard S tier production quality on the shorts, cinematics. Like World of Warcraft shorts and cinematics too are just godlike compared to to compared to like other franchises. Like there's definitely huge ones out there. Like God of War, for example, is just like kind of a masterpiece in like gaming, and that has like, you know, really good cinematics too. But like Blizzard just does it to a ridiculous level. When you obviously you competed in TF2 and whatnot growing up. You moved to Australia recently. Did you play in like the Aussie leagues? I assume like the Kiwi leagues and the Aussie leagues were like pretty.
It's all one. It's all
part and
one.
parcel. Yeah, that's what I thought. There's not enough people otherwise, I'd imagine.
No, I mean, there's probably still not enough people even with that combined. I mean, just ping wise, it's about all you can really do.
What's the ping from New Zealand to Australia?
Oh, like nothing, dude. It's barely noticeable. 5-10 difference, maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
So maybe more than that. But like, yeah, like you wouldn't. It'd be the difference between like 10 or 40 ping. It's all close enough.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You made the big move to Oz. Well, I wouldn't say recent. It's not recently at this point, but you're in Australia.
A couple
now.
years now, actually.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years. I was always curious. It's pretty easy for a Kiwi to get a visa, right? For Australia. Australia.
You don't even need one. You don't even need one
Oh,
legally.
yeah,
like
okay.
legally, you're a resident of both.
Interesting. Oh, yeah, I
So
did wonder.
if you're from Australia, you can just freely go into New Zealand, do what you want, and if you're from New Zealand, you can go to Australia and do what you want.
It's almost like, well, I guess not with the UK now.
Full open
EU,
borders.
But yeah, it definitely felt like that in the past with a lot of European countries in the UK. Like a lot of them are just like, yeah, you can come over and work. Like it's not a problem, you know. Like it's pretty easy. So that's pretty sick. I mean, obviously competing, going into like commentary and stuff. When did you push first into commentary? Like, what was your first casting gig? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact first one because it's too long ago. But the earliest VOD I ever found was in 2011. So I just say 2011. But
Okay.
it might have been in 2010, but I can't remember because I can't verify that. I'm not gonna bother saying it, because I'm just making stuff up at that point. But the earliest VOD I can remember finding was from 2011, and back then, Twitch was really new, like really new, and there were dudes kind of streaming the games on their Twitch channel at the time and casting from there. Because before then, Mitch will know, you'd have to be one of the OGs like me or Mitch from way back in the day to remember this. But like, you used to have those Winamp casting. It was, what the pre-Twitch, pre-YouTube, pre-Twitch. Like, what was it? You were casting through the Winamps and stuff like that, and recording. You'd have to like sync up. Well, you wouldn't have to sync up, but like basically you're listening to this audio stream while watching from an STV in game. STV is kind of like this server you join in game, a spectator server in game.
Right.
So it's kind of like the Dota 2 thing now, where you can just like watch the game, the competition, the esport, the game from within the game client. So back in TF2 days, I'm pretty sure you could do this in Counter-Strike as well. There'd be a thing called STV, where basically in the lobby there would be the spectator, which I think you have to excuse my memory of the technology here. It was basically like a bot that joined the lobby, and then through the bot provided an STV server, which then like however many spectators who just wanted to watch the game would join. Because again, there was no Twitch, no YouTube. So how do you watch these competitive games, right? As far as esports goes, and early on in esports, you kind of have to have some proof, and you get the proof by having demos, which is number one, or better yet, live spectators that can actually see the thing. Because otherwise, it's just like there's competition, but the competition is just like all word of mouth, who beat who. You listen to the casting, which is an audio stream only. You'd go into the STV and you'd watch, and that's it. And that's how esports was back then.
Was that your first casting gig then, doing the TF2?
Oh yeah, yeah. And it was like 2011. This guy's Twitch channel, and I was basically, because I was still playing, competing at the time, and the guy asked me, because he already knew me. I guess we were friends, and there's like, obviously you're a good player, you know something about the game. Do you want to come and cast with me because he was just kind of solo casting. There weren't any sort of like organized ways to cast. Everyone's just kind of stabbing in the dark and figuring it out. This guy was solo casting. He asked me to just join him and see how it goes. So I did, and you know, I think most Mitch will say this as well. It's like back then when you're just a player, your casting is just trash talking the other players. Like I'm kind of talking about
That's
the
what it is
game.
now. What do you
I'm
mean?
kind of talking. Yeah, I guess no, but like trash talking the other players from the perspective of a player. Do you know what I mean? Like that kind of style. It's like bringing the in game, all chat into a broadcast almost kind of
Yeah,
deal.
yeah, for sure.
So yeah, there was a bunch of that kind of stuff going on, and pretty basics. I obviously not good casting. Hopefully that footage of me will never be found because it's obviously it's just awful.
Yeah.
You know, I cringe listening to stuff like that. Like I think anybody who's a caster, you listen to your super early stuff and you just cringe. It's just like,
Yep.
oh my god.
Do you ever get
What
the
on
feeling you're
earth am
still
I-
the same? I always find that I'm like, have I improved ever? Like, am I just the same as I was like 6
I've
years ago?
definitely
Or whatever?
improved.
Yeah.
Considering how
I go back, I'm like,
there's some
oh yes, I have. Holy moly.
right, even stuff from like 3-4 years ago, I feel like is much worse than stuff I'm doing,
Yeah.
last year that
I
I
mean,
will be doing this year, hopefully.
it's gradual improvement, right? And that's the thing you don't see is the gradual improvement. And compare that to like drastic improvement, like, oh my god, like straight from, you can't be a shitter and then straight to like God mode, like you have to gradually improve, but you personally don't see that. Like other people will from like, oh, I watched you 2 years ago and now I'm watching you now. You're like way
You
better,
see it,
etc.
you see it if you watch an old VOD of yourself, you're like, ooh, made a lot of mistakes on that one,
Rough.
or
Yeah, yeah.
you're just like, that's a bit rough. That doesn't sound that good. Then you'll notice it. But I didn't. But that's the first cast I did. But I wouldn't say that's when I started casting. If that makes sense. Like I didn't start like properly casting.
So
that was
when
just the first.
that's a question then. So when was your first paid gig and what was it? If that
Paid
would
was
you
in 2016.
right?
But I did stuff before then. Like I eventually, because Dota 2 came out, that was my first game I quote unquote took seriously in terms of casting, where I was like, I might do casting for this game instead of playing, because I actually wanted to play first. And I was like reasonable. I was good. I wasn't like elite. I was definitely not as good as I was in TF2 in Dota.
Sure.
That's for sure. But also I kind of got annoyed with Dota eventually. I don't even think there was ranked at the first, because I was seriously playing during like the beta and during like the TI1 sort of era before even TI2. And I remember the reason I swapped, I actually swapped over to Dota because I was a disgruntled TF2 player. I didn't even swap because like, oh, I love Dota, I love MOBAs. That wasn't even the reason. The reason was because Valve did not support TF2 competitively. And it was just like a jokey, casual game. The game only got more casual as the years went on. Sound like a familiar game, Jules? We'll get into that later. And it was just got such little competitive support from the developer. I mean, Valve classically don't give a flying fuck about their games, to some degree. I gotta give them a little bit of credit here, but yeah, TF2 was just never, And I remember at the time, like the TF2 people spoke to like Robin Walker and stuff, like they were in communication with the devs and talking about what kind of dev support there could be. Could there be esports, because this could take off, and it was a fairly popular game, and it just never really went anywhere. And so Dota came out, and you know what happened. So here's the history on Dota 2. When Dota 2 came out, it was announced alongside this event called the International. Everyone knows the International now. Tens of millions of dollar prize pool. First International was a $1 million prize pool. I think it was $1 million for first place. The overall prize pool is several million, because you got to split the rest of it. But you come in first place, Navi won, you get $1 million. At the time, that was unprecedented. Now it's like, I feel like most top tournaments, if you're not offering 7 figures, it doesn't even feel like a top tournament. Back then, unheard of. The biggest prize pools before the International for 1 mil was like $250,000, I remember.
Yeah.
Might have been the highest prize pool I've ever seen. And that was for like Counter-Strike, first place, world final, Counter-Strike 1.6 at the time, I think was, and 50k split, 50k for each player, 5 players, 50k each, 250 for the entire price, and that was humongous. I used to think like, whoa, ooh, 250, damn son. And that didn't even cover a developer. I think that came from the TO and their sponsors or whatever. So Valve come out with this 1 mil tournament for first place for Dota, and then you see all this competitive support that Dota's getting. You see all this esports support they're getting, even from the developer side. Because remember, TI is like, very heavily Valve supported. Sure, like, from a production standpoint, PGL, whoever takes care of it. But like, Valve are very involved with that. You even look at like the compendium and stuff like that. Like they're making content, in-game content, which supports the esports and directly funds esports. Like, how do they do this crowdfunding thing where everyone buys the compendium and they level up, they pay money, whatever, and then 25% goes towards the price pool. That's their entire model. So the point is, I see all of this, and I'm fuming. I'm furious. Like, you are joking. You are absolutely shitting me, Valve, because you've given us nothing. You've given the TF2 people nothing. Not a lick. I'm like Oliver. Is it Oliver Twist?
Oliver Twist. Can I have some more, sir? Yeah.
Yeah, can I have some more? I'm like, it's Christmas. It's Christmas, and I'm on the outside, cold.
Don't worry, we got hats on the way, baby.
Clear the ice off the windows and whatever, the snow off the windows, and just trying to look in to see all these kids enjoying their presents and meals, and I'm like this cold, starving child on the outside playing TF2. So I'm like, screw it, can't beat him, join him. I started playing Dota 2. Wasn't even a big MOBA fan, just did it because that was the game that Valve supported. So whatever, I'll do it. But I learned to love the game. I actually really enjoyed the game and got reasonably good at it, but not like super good. And then started casting when I realized I was both not going to probably make this as a game that I could compete in, but also I felt like I enjoyed casting to some degree. It wasn't like a full 1 or 2 year gap. Like, I casted one time at TF2, then I went to Dota 2. It was more like I casted a few times in TF2 as like a guest, like a player guest on a cast. And then so I got a little bit of a knack for it. I felt like, yeah, this is something I could probably do. I know games, like I can talk about games. I'm strategic. I know analysis. And so I went to Dota and started taking it seriously. And I think I peaked in Dota on this tournament called WPC Ace, which had actual professional Chinese teams. And back then, you would cast the Dota games from within the client. So it's not like, I think most broadcasting now, you receive a clean feed, you're in vMix, whatever, or some other program. Back then, you were like literally in the lobby. So I'm in the lobby with this guy, and I'm casting over like 2 reasonably top tier professional teams. I remember one of the teams was Tong Fu, which in the early TI days was like a serious contender team. And I remember freaking out. I was like, no way, no effing way. I'm in the same lobby, live casting a game with actual top tier professionals, global top tier professionals in my lobby. This is unreal. I had to like reality check myself. I think that was the first time I was like, whoa, whoo. And that was maybe my favorite Dota cast ever, because it was the highest level Dota cast ever did. I was just so impressed and so bewildered by how high level the gameplay was. And I knew it was because I'd watched plenty of games anyway, but like being there and casting it with something else, that really, I think that was a moment. The reason why I always go back to that moment and always remember it quite fondly was because I think that's when it sparked the real drive for casting. It was like, okay, I got that adrenaline rush, and now for the rest of my life, that's kind of what I'm looking for, where like I get to be in the top tier lobby, casting the best games with the best players, having the best performance and best gameplay and whatever. Like, that's nothing else matched that in esports for me, which is where casting took off.
Did you get paid for that gig?
Hell no. I didn't get paid for 2016.
No. So what was your? So what was the? What was the 2016 gig you got paid for then? That Overwatch, right?
So in May of 2016, Overwatch came out. A well-known game that we all
well-known game.
Overwatch came out. And so in 2016, I got paid to do a Call of Duty broadcast, not an Overwatch broadcast.
Oh, wait, what COD was in 2016? Was that Advanced
Infinite Warfare?
Oh, Infinite Warfare.
Yeah, November, Infinite War. I chose the right card, right? In hindsight, I think most people would agree it's actually a fine. No. I think
in hindsight, it probably is okay, but I did not like the war.
It was fine. Bro. It was fine. I think it came out, but the problem is it came out at a time where people were sick of the advanced aerial movement kind of stuff, people were
Yep.
sick of jetpacks.
They
That was
were,
a
yeah.
problem. But like fundamentally in a vacuum, I think it's a fine game. The game is fine. Like it's a good game in a vacuum.
Because Advanced
I'll tell
Warfare
you
was the
what,
first one, I'm pretty sure, that had the jetpacks and stuff.
and
they also had the
Black Ops. No, Black Ops 3. Yeah, No, you're right. You're right. No,
I
you were
think
right.
it's
I was trying to
Advanced
think maybe
Warfare,
Black
'cause
Ops
I
2 had
remember
it.
selling that game. No, Black Ops 2 did not have it, because I played that game.
Okay.
I was like top rated in Black Ops 2, like on ladder at least. I was like masters on ladder, on 360, and that was like my favorite game of all time, like competitively, or like one of my favorite games.
I think a lot of people say Black Ops 3 is one of, if not the best CODs. Certainly
I did not
competitively,
play
it's
Black Ops
right up
3,
there.
which is crazy.
It actually was tight. I remember
Really? Because I
talking
gave up
to-
off of Ghosts, bro. I played COD Ghost. I was like, this game is the worst game they've ever released. Like, that game sucked. The hit rate
I actually didn't play it.
sucked. The lag, or not the lag, or like, I guess it counts on a hit rate. It blew. You get killed around a corner so many times. Like, the way... Dude, there was obviously... There's normally like one gun that's super OP, but coming from Black Ops 2, which had a few good guns, like you'd play the burst rifle. I'm gonna forget the names. I need to ask Matthew Morello, who played in Black Ops 2, but you got the burst rifle, which was really good. You had the Scorpion, the SMG, and then you'd run like AR SMG. You could run sniper if you really wanted to on ladder, but yeah, on Ghost just blew, dude. What a shit game.
That was the first Call of Duty that I did not buy, that my friends basically told me not to get. They're like, don't bother, waste of time. Because I didn't get... So, okay, I also did not get COD 1, 2, or 3. But from COD 4 onwards, I got all the COD games.
COD 4 was like
the
base, you know what I mean? Like, that was the...
I tried playing that competitively a little bit. That's actually where Uber comes from. That was his, like... Yeah,
on PC,
Pro Mod, PC.
I didn't play it until later on Pro Mod. I played on Xbox mainly.
Yeah. I got farmed. I was not good at COD Pro Mod. I got destroyed. I was like on a B team for like a I wasn't even on the A team. I was on the B team for a squad, and no, I just was not good enough. Sadly, not my type of game. Like the arena shooters was more my forte. Whereas like I hesitate to call it tactical shooter, but it's still way more tactical than an arena shooter. COD is like feels a bit more like a run and gun game. It's definitely not Counter-Strike, but you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did Advanced Warfare, not Advanced Warfare, Infinite Warfare.
Right. And that was for
the other,
who? ESL?
No, that was for the New Zealand based esports TO called Let's Play Live, who currently run the Valorant circuit in OCE.
Oh wow, they're still going.
That was their second ever event. Sick. That was their second ever event. And I remember, do I even remember how much I got paid?
I was going to ask you, what's the day rate on that? I'm very curious.
Dude, unbelievably low. But like, I
mean, first gig.
I can't even remember. I think I'm pretty sure like the invoice is there somewhere.
Yeah.
But safe to say, at the time, for like a per hour rate, you're like, well, this beats flipping a burger. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was like when you compare it to that, you're like, wow, this is better than like doing retail or something on a per hour basis. So you're like, well, this is a huge win then, because you had nothing to compare it to. To be fair, it's not like they were trying to screw me. I say it's low. It's low by today's standards, but at the time in 2016, it's not like they didn't know better. I didn't know better. We just like, this seems fair. You know, these are people getting to esports from outside of esports, non-endemics, right?
It's also not like League of Legends, you know. So
the game didn't matter. That part didn't even enter the equation. It was simply like, you're doing a job. What is it worth per hour?
Yeah.
Blah blah blah.
So what would your estimate be off the top of your head? Was it like, could you do it in USD? Obviously, it would be like in Kiwi dollars, right?
Too hard, like.
Because mine was 250 euros in 2016
for a day.
For like, yeah, it was like 2 BO3s or something. No, like 4. No, not 2 BO3s. It'd be like 4 BO3s or 5 BO3s or something. Yeah, of like, this is a mobile game though, Mobile Legends, which isn't might be renamed, but the game itself is gone. The game I casted is gone.
You actually got me looking through.
I got you hunting.
I'm going hunting at the moment.
Yeah, I can't imagine it was, you know, like you said, it wasn't near like $1,000 or anything, right? Like you're not getting a lot of money. If I had to guess, it's probably the same as me, like probably like $200, right?
It was $400 for a week.
Ooh.
But I'm trying to remember
for the week.
But I'm trying to remember how many broadcasts I did in that week. So it was 400 per week for 7 weeks. How many? Which is not a bad season. But I'm trying to remember how many broadcasts I do per week. Was it 2 or 3 days? I really can't remember.
Okay, we'll take the baseline then. We'll say
my mind goes to
$150 a day, or like $200 a day. Then what? Kiwi dollars, right?
Yeah. I mean, you can convert it over, but in terms of like local currency cost of living, it's you can just imagine it's roughly similar. I mean, it's obviously sounds way less if you convert it over to US, but
for sure,
I'm not paying US money to live in New Zealand either, so
yeah.
So it's roughly about 200 a broadcast, roughly.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, for your first gig, it being like a COD game too, right? I think that seems pretty reasonable. It's not too far out there, especially for the time as well.
Funny story.
That bad.
So obviously here's a funny story about the people I worked with in terms of like how boomerish they were, and I don't mean that as a slight against them. It's just for the sake of the funny story, but it's like obviously I got to play the game. The game was just coming out, so they wanted to do Black Ops 3, by the way, and I said no, you don't want to do Black Ops 3, which sounds stupid to people because Black Ops 3 was a better game, but hindsight 2020. The reason you don't want to do it is because the new game's about to come out. If you want to do Call of Duty, you want to do the new game.
Yeah.
Because the timing of the tournament, the timing of this league, whatever, the 7-week thing they're doing, was going to be post-launch of the new game. Or I think it was close enough to post-launch. I was like, it was close enough to the post-launch. I was like, well, you might as well do it post-launch with the new game. So I convinced them to do it on the new game, assuming it'd be a really good Call of Duty. Who I still think it was a fine Call of Duty. And so we did that. And obviously, because it's new, I'm like, well, can I get a copy of the game? Can you guys get me a copy of the game as part of like, you know, the expense of the whole thing? And they're like, all right, sure. And so they go through their supply or whatever chain they have, and they get me a copy of the game. And I'm like, don't bother giving me the physical. You don't need to give me the physical copy. I just need the code. So I just need like the code I can put into Steam, right? So you look at I told them where to look to find the code and just send me that. And they're like, so how are you going to install the game then? I'm like, well, I'm going to download it. And they're like, well, isn't that going to take you forever? I'm like, no, I can do that in like an hour. And they're like, they blew their minds. Because these are older dudes. These are older dudes and they're like 40 pluses or whatever. And the idea of like downloading an entire game through the internet blew their minds. Like they were just bewildered. Like, what do you mean you don't need the disc? What do you mean you're not going to install this? Like what? Like they couldn't get around that. And I had pretty fast internet at the time, for standards back in those days. And yeah, they just didn't understand at all. I just thought it was funny. Their minds are like how they
download a game.
Technology, how they thought technology and the internet worked is just so far behind.
We've been downloading games forever. Like, what do you mean? Huh? What's going on?
I actually did play-by-play for that, by the way. For Call of Duty, I did play-by-play.
Not even
I did. It was bad.
Not even color?
It was bad.
Oh yeah, I imagine. Well, like, come on, like your first paid gig is it's like a COD game. Like, come on, it's not gonna be good. I look back at my Mobile Legends stuff and I'm like, what the hell was I saying? Like, I knew the game and like I knew the characters in the game, I knew the abilities and stuff, but like I didn't like, dude, I didn't know how to play with play. Are you serious? I just got told you're gonna play with play. I'm like, okay, sounds good. I like to be that guy. I want to be dope.
Well, I wasn't originally gonna play by play, but then I ended up doing play by play. Here's another fun fact. I was already casting with PIxie at the time doing Hearthstone. He was gonna be my play. I was gonna do the color, but then he had a falling out with the TO, and he basically got booted off the broadcast. PIxie did.
What?
So
the Hearthstone one?
No, the Call of Duty broadcast. We were both supposed to be on it. Because he had worked on the League of Legends one prior, and I did the second one, which is the Call of Duty one, because I was the FPS guy. But he was meant to be a play-by-play. He got removed from broadcast because they had a falling out, and I ended up being the play-by-play, and they got another guy to pair with me. But because he was very inexperienced at casting, it was like, well, he can't be the play-by-play. That wouldn't make sense. So he ended up being the color. And so that's how it went down. So it wasn't even like, oh yeah, I'm gonna come in, I'm gonna be Mr. Playboy. It wasn't even really my choice. It's just how it
Right.
ended up being.
That's ridiculous. I mean, that's fair. I mean, to be fair, back then, even with me, it's just like, well, I'm lucky, I guess I had like a permanent color caster to cast with always, regardless of the game. They'd always color and I'd always play by play. So I'm kind of lucky. But you just kind of filled the shoes of whatever was kind of needed at that point. It wasn't like, nah, I'm just going to do this, you know, like, to be fair, in my first League of Legends broadcasts, I'm doing both color. Well, that's what I fucking do now, to be fair, like play by play and color in Overwatch, because I just like talking about the game, right? But like, I definitely did color as well as like play by play.
I'm sorry, you're saying you're a hyperflex?
I would say I'm a hyperflex. I did a whole year of color casting.
Let's start a Reddit thread with us. Is Jaws a hyperflex?
I've done desk. I've done a whole year of color casting in the Overwatch League, and I've done play by play. I'm mainly a play by play, but although some people don't know what those words mean, and you know, we won't explain that now, but like you should know if you don't know. But
you can Google it.
Yeah, you can Google
Use
it.
your fingers.
It's fine. Let's move on to current day then, because
Fair enough.
we talked about like how you kind of came up. I'm curious. Now, obviously, we're going into our fourth year. Sorry, not fourth year.
Sixth year.
The 6th year. I'm speaking about my 4th year, but it will be your 3rd year of the Overwatch League. My 4th.
Wow.
Obviously, if we get invited back, just gonna like there's a little asterisk there. If me and AVRL get asked back, then you know, it will be our 4th and 3rd year. There you go. Obviously, the China situation went down recently. Like, I honestly just want your thoughts on that, because the China situation is ridiculous. Like the publishing deal in China falling through, like with NetEase, and then NetEase like owning a stake in one of the teams. Like, how are you viewing the situation currently? I think because I feel you're much more in tune, especially with the Chinese community, because you can read like Chinese, like Mandarin. So
I can't read Chinese. I can speak and understand it, but I can't read it.
But you're still way more in tune, I'd say.
I guess
with that side of like the game in the world than like most other people, I'd say.
What was the date? What was the date on the thing again? Because it should be now, right? Because we're mid-January, and I think the end of the publishing is around now. Is that correct? I can't remember.
I'd have to check.
So, yeah, it should be happening pretty soon. I mean, what we do know.
Oh, for the viewers out there, by the way, I'm just gonna caveat this. This is recorded on the 16th of January. I'm just gonna put that out there. This episode won't be live though.
Yeah.
For like a few weeks. So just
16th
gonna put that
of January.
Out. Yep, 16th of January.
2024. That's when we record this.
2023.
2025.
2025.
So we know that Spark, obviously, they just got Ray. They brought him back because obviously he's got to come in for every even season. He doesn't play the odd seasons. Only comes in on the even seasons. He's about to assemble the Shy Leave, like basically fantasy draft DPS duo. And there was a rumor, I'm going to take this with a grain of salt because these things usually are just rumors, that Spark aren't working with a lot of money this year, which makes a lot of sense because I assume the Chinese teams are not going to be heavily investing into AL this year. But they are going to do something. So we basically know everyone's doing something. Obviously, there's been, I think, a lot of hyperbole and people freaking out about the China situation. It's bad, but it's not like the East Division is just deleted. It's not like the Chinese teams are just deleted and they're just gone. I mean, there's still going to be a league. They're still going to compete. There's still going to be teams. There's still going to be a season. So that's all going to go forward. What kind of funding they receive is just going to be the big difference. Like Prophet just got re-signed to Seoul, but I have to imagine that his salary is going to be a lot lower than it used to be. I mean, I know or at least have a very, very somewhat precise rough idea of what his salary previously was on Seoul. Pretty fucking high. Whereas this time around, I don't think it will be. I think Seoul have definitely looked to, obviously, you look at all the things they've been publicly saying, they're looking to cut down on their expenses by a reasonable amount as well, as are most teams. I do want to say one thing about the whole NetEase deal situation. I think a lot of people were assuming that the teams there are trying to cut down and trying to like go budget because of that. And I think there is some impact, especially if you are one of the Chinese teams. But I will say that I have it on pretty good authority that teams from the Eastern region were looking to cut down anyway. because I had already known about some roster rumors and potential moves, and even some potential money moves in terms of like what the roster moves could have been worth before the NetEase stuff was even announced. And the teams didn't know about it either. That was like a surprise and shock for the teams in
Right.
the
Right.
NetEase publishing deal stuff. So what I'm basically saying is like, yeah, like teams will probably use the NetEase deal to either further justify or use it as an excuse to say we're going to cut down, but a lot of them were cutting down anyway. Even if there was no publishing thing going on with NetEase, and we even if that didn't blow up, and we continue with NetEase as a publisher, I'm saying that those teams, a large number of those teams, probably would have gone budget anyway. Maybe the Chinese teams would have held on a bit longer. Maybe the Hangzhou Spark would have invested a little bit more. But yeah, that the deal impacts the Chinese teams way more than the other teams.
Yeah. Do you think it's going to have a knock-on effect then later down the line for the Chinese teams? Because everything does seem still up in the air. It's very unlikely that we hear anything, at least not before the league starts. I feel like we're going to hear stuff a day before the league starts, you know.
Huh.
Do you think that's going to have a knock-on impact for the rest of the league? Because I think at this point,
Already has.
everybody's
Already has.
wishing that the East and the West would just kind of combine and you make one super region again.
No. People say that, but then somebody loses. Which time zone loses? Do you know who's saying they want the regions combined? Or the NA people?
Yeah, that's true.
The EU and Asian people aren't saying it because they know they'll be the losers time zone wise. Beyond that as well, it's like it's not easy to put everyone together. Where are you going to put them? This is such like I don't know, such a like what's the right term? I was going to call it a fantasy. It is a bit of a fantasy, but it's just unrealistic. Like logistically, completely unrealistic. There's no Blizzard Arena anymore. Who's paying for that, by the way? Who would pay for that if we were to bring it back? Everyone would say, well, Blizzard should pay for it. It's like that's a massive cost for Blizzard for the broadcast. There's no centralized venue, and getting all the visas, and by the way, there's a lot of housing and a lot of logistics for the teams. Who's paying for the teams to all be in one location again? The teams would have to pay for that. The teams are not that they probably get all the big mansions like they did in season one, but they got to do something. They got to house the teams somewhere. They're going to get all these P1 visas, especially for the Chinese teams. Some of them might be difficult to get for player wise. Okay, COVID is mostly like a forgotten thing now, especially in the US. But in other places of the world, it's a little bit more. I think we just went to Korea not that long ago. I would say it's like not extreme there, but it's still people still wary of it. And then China's still like actual lockdowns and stuff. So depending on where you are, like COVID either completely doesn't exist or it's still like a huge thing. I just think it's like logistically not doable to have the entire league in one place again. Nor do I think that would actually make it a good product because you're just not serving the fan bases of particular regions by combining all together. One fan base wins big time and everyone else loses big time is my position on that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a reasonable take. It's not fair on the kind of other regions. To be fair, EU got rolled as well by Overwatch League for the last couple of years, or like the first 2 years because of time zones and stuff. I remember being in Ukraine with Trid, me and Trid just hanging, and it's like, do you want to watch Overwatch League? And it's like, yeah, we kind of can't because it's like too late at night, especially in Ukraine too, which was Eastern Europe. That's not even like the UK, which is like, you could probably watch the league if you stayed up a little bit, but Eastern Europe is even later for us. Yeah, it's a tough one. I think obviously going into this year, there's always going to be off season's pretty tough for like casters in general, like across the board, not even Overwatch, like League of Legends, like Rainbow Six, like name any other esport basically. And there's a lot of like question marks, right? You get told one thing, maybe that thing happens, maybe something else happens. I always it's always in the forefront of my mind of like, what happens if I don't cast anymore? What happens if I do something else? And I wanted to know your kind of thought process on that. I want to know, what would you do? What would you pivot to if you weren't able to cast, or like even if you didn't want to anymore? What is something that you'd go into?
Yeah, I would probably see if there's other things in esports I could do in the interim. But if I was to leave esports entirely, I think there's a bit of a far-fetched dream I have of like, I don't know, getting into my own business and starting something up and just kind of like trying to be a bit of an entrepreneur about it. I just think like the one thing, and that's why like even now it's something I think about while in esports, because the one thing that I have as a benefit now is that as a caster, if you're working on at least like a good broadcast, you can get paid a full-time salary while only working about 6 months out of the year. So you have a lot of free time. Um, Ideally, we work more than 6 months out of the year because like that's just way too long of an off season. So we'd like the off season to be shorter, but because there's so much time, you know, you got to figure out some stuff to do in the time. I could pick up more casting. I think I'm at the stage where I don't know if I necessarily want to heavily move into other games. I'll never say never. Like, it's always on the table, but like, yeah, I think for me, I'm in the position where I'd rather explore other potential revenue streams and other ways to, you know, find an income outside of esports, because the one way to protect yourself from esports is to, or to be safe from having an income outside of esports. For example, I think you remember Desachu, who now does R6.
Yeah, it was still.
That guy's got it figured out. I think he's living the dream, because what he's basically doing is he has his own company. He obviously has, you know, plenty of money coming in from outside of esports. He doesn't have to worry about whether he has a job every year because he's fine.
He could leave. And he could literally leave esports and still be extremely well off. Yeah.
You can just do esports for fun. I mean, I think that's the real dream. You actually have enough money coming in from other sources outside of esports.
Yeah.
And then you can just do esports for fun, where you get to have all the great stuff that comes along with working on a tier 1 broadcast while not having to worry about your livelihood every single year. Imagine taking away all the stress about worrying about your livelihood. How much better, more comfortable would your life be? Like way better, right? So that's the position that I think unfortunately we all got to be in, because as much as I love esports, the biggest problem I have, and that I think everyone else has, preaching to the choir here, is that it's just super unstable. And that's something, you know, we all have to, it's a bitter pill we have to swallow. I mean, when you look at the LCS being, you know, basically downgraded and downsized, budgets being cut, people being let go, like, damn, dude, like, that was a flagship broadcast in the esports industry. If LCS can get plundered, nobody's safe. Nothing's safe, right? I mean,
for context,
a few years back,
I will add, the LCS moved to a weekday slot rather than a weekend, which it kind of always was, to make room for Valorant, is what is happening. At least that's all they've kind of tweeted out, and they've said.
A weekday day spot as well.
Yeah,
it will broadcast while people are at work and at school.
Yeah. Reminds me of Overwatch League in like Thursday and Fridays, you know, when we did 4-day
And while
weeks.
that's happening, while it's broadcasting on a weekday, like that, people think, well, what's wrong with that? It's like, first of all, you're definitely, your viewership's going to go way down. Viewership else for the LCS has already been a problem, especially in the last 2 years. Now it's about to go way down because you got to get far less people watching because they're at work and school. Beyond that as well, they're just downsizing the whole broadcast, the whole league. All, like we've talked about, salaries being market corrected for LCS is probably a good thing, because those teams can't afford. You hear the rumors about the $1 million salaries. You're like, Jesus Christ. Is no way. No team in any esports should be paying $1 million for a player. I know players are not going to like me for saying that, but be reasonable here. It's, first of all, most of you guys are not worth $1 million. You do not bring $1 million worth of value to the team. Let's be real. You can admit that. With your 2,000 followers on Twitter, you ain't bringing shit to the table. I'm sorry. But beyond that as well, like, it's just not affordable for the teams. If you want esports to be a sustainable thing on its own that can stand on its own, you know, players can't be like rinsing these teams for millions of bucks when these teams just like lose so much money that esports is just not a viable venture for them. I mean, you hear this from team owners where like the joke is you gain all your money on content creators and then lose all of it on esports. That's the joke. So yeah, I think the salaries correcting is good, and that's partially why salaries are being corrected in Overwatch as well. Most of them are heading downwards, because even paying dudes on 300, 400, 200 whatever K feels a little awkward when the teams are not getting anywhere near that level of return for that player. And the problem with Overwatch League players as well is like you don't even have huge personalities. Like we don't have a Scump. The closest we've had is like Super and XQC, but they're both retired now. Seagull retired. It's funny. When they retire, they become really big. I would argue Super was already pretty big on his way to
He
retirement, but
was,
that's a different
yeah.
story.
No, Super was the face of the league, you'd say.
But now
like
that Super's
100%.
gone, it's like, what do we really have? You know, who's left? You have Dante and Space, who are probably the next biggest two.
Yeah.
But they just got dropped from their teams. Like these guys, they're now the biggest two names in the league, and I'm sure they'll find a team again. But the point is like they currently can't even hold on to their teams, or their teams don't want to play with them, whatever it is. And the rest of the players don't have huge followings, and it's hard for them to get huge followings when, you know, they might be swapping teams every year, or they just might only be in the league for a couple of years. So, you know, that was a long tangent, but back to where we were originally about casting. This is like an esports thing in general for me, where basically there is a bit of a, you know, a market correction downturn in all of esports globally, I feel. And I think that LCS being kind of downsized the way it has been is been a bit of a wake up call. Definitely for me, but I think probably for a lot of casters out there as well. It's like, look, you could make it to the promised land and still have everything taken away.
Yeah, well, that's freelancing in general. I wouldn't even say that's like commentary too, right? So it's
Sure.
across the board. Freelancing can be tough, and especially in a bear market, not so great. Let's move on to something a little bit more positive. Look, everybody loves talking shit and like talking negatively about esports and how we're all gonna get fucked. But like, I wanna, you know, that kind of stuff. I think at least over the last few weeks, and especially with the NetEase stuff, it's like very easy to talk about like how depressing shit is right now. So we'll nip that one in the bud. We'll put that cork in the bottle of that one, and we'll throw that out to sea real fast. I want to know. This is a question I've asked a couple of people now, but I think it's always really interesting to see who are people. Can I speak English? Do the words come out of my mouth? Who's your biggest inspiration? It's interesting to always see different people's inspirations, whether that's commentary, whether that's, you know, literally anything in their lives. It could be an artist if they're an artist. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
Who is your biggest inspiration? It could be anybody in esports, to be fair, or like in regular sports or whatever. Like, who would you say your biggest inspiration is?
I'd say the three casters that have had the biggest influence on me in terms of like, let me extend that to four. Actually, I would say now it's probably closer to four that have had the biggest inspiration on me in terms of like the level of quality that I aim to reach and deliver is in no particular order. It would be Papa Smithy, Deficio, Monte Cristo, and Henry G. Those four guys.
Okay.
That's my color caster Mount Rushmore currently.
Wow. Yeah, that is a stacked list of like veteran talent, color talent, color casting talent. Wow.
So when I was coming through, those are kind of the guys I was looking at. Like, okay, well, you know, what kind of qualities do they have? What are they bringing to the broadcast? What kind of things are they saying? Why are they saying them?
Yeah.
What are their styles and all that kind of stuff. And of that, I've had the pleasure of meeting both Monty and Papa, which is really cool. And what else would I have been inspired by? I mean, there's a lot of great play-by plays out there, but I would say that I hadn't as much look towards play-by-plays for direct inspiration because it's not really my role.
Reasonable, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I've been inspired necessarily by anyone else. I mean, I think we can leave it at that for now, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty, I mean, like I said, that's a lot of veteran, like, color casting talent. Like, a lot of people that kind of paved the way for color commentary. I mean, Monte Cristo, you know, you love him or you hate him. Like, he is a fantastic storyteller. Like, his color casting is extremely good. Papa Smithy as well is phenomenal. He's very chill too. I've hung out with Papa Smithy a couple of times. Like, he is nicest motherfucker around. Like, goddamn, he is yeah, it's insane how nice that man is. Seriously, I didn't know him personally, but when the first time I went to Korea, I met Seth. I remember the station and the exact exit I got out and saw Seth for the first time. That sounds really weird. It sounds like I'm in a relationship with Seth. Like I remember our first kiss. You know what I'm saying? Like, but no, I remember the exact kind of exact station, exact exit we got out, and me and him went for food, and Papa Smithy joined us, and I'm like, holy shit, it's Papa Smithy. You know, because
Yep.
for me at that point I was like, god damn, like I was a noob, like a complete like noob, and I'm like, holy shit. And it's very strange, you know, because you're like, I watch you all the fucking time, and you know, I'm no way near your level. But then, you know, it's something I said in a different deep dive. Everybody's just a person. So yeah,
Yep.
it is funny. It is funny how that works out. I think it's interesting that you actually picked a lot of people from different games too.
Yeah.
A lot of different styles of color casting there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important because like there's something to learn from all different people in terms of their backgrounds, their styles, and the games that they do. Because the different games demand different things out of them as well. So yeah, a really good mix there. Um, and I would also say as well, like someone I didn't mention, but I probably should because my first ever esports broadcast that I remember seeing was back in 2005. I still remember it, WCG 2005, Suntec Arena, Singapore. I watched online through some. I think I trolled through the Team Liquid forums back then. You had to get some streaming link in like 360p from some forum. Again, no YouTube. Um, and it was StarCraft Brood War was the big game I was into at that stage. It was the first like esport that I ever watched and kind of brought me in. And if whoever knows the history, you'll know that the guy casting it back then was Tasteless.
Yeah.
He was the guy doing WCG for StarCraft, and that was I think his first broadcast as well. One of his first broadcasts was it was in that year doing the WCG stuff. He was a player, and he went from being a player to then jumping on a broadcast, and the rest is history. Then eventually went to Korea, paved the way, basically godfather of like doing English commentary in Korea. He was I think the first one there basically.
I think so. Yeah.
And then everyone else came afterwards. I mean, I'll throw our toasters in there as like a duos, and the Taste Toasters duo is iconic. But for me, like I think one of the first voices I ever heard in esports was Tasteless, and he really did pave the way for a lot of esports. That feeling that you would describe about meeting Papa Smithy, I think that's kind of how I felt when I first met Tasteless. We were in the RGB bar, and he
Oh yeah.
walks in. I'm like, holy shit, that's Tasteless.
Yeah.
I remember
No,
telling Seth I really
Tasteless,
wanted to meet him.
dude. I love that man. He is so funny, dude. Tasteless is just, he's different, man. He is just such a funny motherfucker. Like,
Yeah.
god damn.
Yeah.
Never
Yeah.
forgets her
So that
face
was
either. Never forgets.
I think
her
that was
face.
the only time. I think it was the only time I've been like, that was maybe like the second time I was like seriously starstruck. The first time was 2017 Santa Monica World Cup stage. I was on
Okay,
the
wow.
committee for Team New Zealand, where we got smashed by Jake's team there for Team USA. He wasn't the one I was starstruck by. Jake's cool. Jake's cool, but he's just a
He
guy.
ain't that cool.
No, no. I was starstruck by not by ZP,
Zeeps?
by
Aw.
Monty and Doa, because
Yeah.
I'd also followed them for quite a while. You know, from the LCK stuff, champions back whenever as well. So they were iconic to me. And I kept the flowing dialogue afterwards as well, where Doa specifically gave me a lot of help. Like seriously, like that guy, I've said this to him multiple times, and I think I've probably said this publicly at least a couple times as well. But like he is one of the dudes that has had like a major impact on my career to the point where like if I didn't meet him and I didn't continue a dialogue with him and get feedback from him and get help from him, I don't know that I'd be here, at least in the position I am today. So I do seriously owe like so much to Doa personally.
Yeah, mad props. Yeah, it feels like everybody's got that one or two people, you know, that have impacted them a lot. And that's interesting that you picked Doa. That's pretty awesome. That's really cool. I'd kind of say the same, although I didn't really have a dialogue with Doa. It was more me watching him cast the Faker versus Ryu Z1v1 clip. And I've told this story millions of times on my stream, but like that's how I got into commentary. If people ask me, how'd you get into commentary? I was like, I saw that clip from 2013 and I was like, that's pretty cool. I don't like doing my degree anymore. Maybe I'll try this.
Yeah.
See what happens, you know?
Still one of the most iconic
awesome
plays and calls of esports history.
It is. It really is. It's insane. That clip will go down in esports history. Even the Evo, the Ryu one, the Ryu clip too. Oh man,
yeah.
Dude, I forgot his. I feel so bad. What is it? Evo moment is a number, but he parries the entire
37?
combo. Yeah, I think Evo moment 37. Yeah, like up there with clips in like esports history for sure.
But because there's no casting behind it, it doesn't have the extra thing added on. So I think for like a clip of like gameplay, it's like straight up there.
Oh, that Evo moment had casting on it. He's like the full parry.
Because like
and he parries the whole combo. Like it's crazy.
It's just cloud. It was just.
Dude,
it's just crowd audio.
The crowd noise just takes over. To be fair, but like he's like with the full parry. There is casting to it, but like the crowd just goes fucking ballistic, and yeah, you can't really hear the casting at all. But there is casting to it for 100% sure. Wow, that's cool. That's biggest inspiration. I think it's really an interesting question because I think a lot of people have it very differently, and you know, depending on like when you came up as a commentator as well. Like I think it's through the ages you kind of see who kind of inspired you, and with players as well. Like obviously they're not going to look up to casters, but they're going to look up to other players in the scene. So I always find it interesting to see who kind of inspired you, and yeah, that's so a good answer. Right, I think we're going to call it here, AVRL. Is there anything you kind of want to shout out or anything like that? I'll have your links down in the description below, and your handle's been on screen. But anything you want to sign off with?
Shout out to the Overwatch League for definitely bringing Jaws and I back for the 6th season. Let's get it, baby. Let's go. Let's get it done.
This was recorded on the 16th of January, and we're technically not signed yet. Just to put that out there, the season is not begun. Like I said, this episode is going to come in a couple of weeks, but foreshadowing, maybe.
No, I hope it'll be a good season. No, I really do. Because, you know, this will be the first season where we actually get to start on Overwatch 2 properly with ranked, with everything. Okay, ranked might be a bit of a meme, but it's at least there. Basically, what I'm trying to say is we're not on some beta patch. We're not on some closed circuit that the rest of the audience can't play. We get to start fresh and hopefully bring in some momentum from the end of the last season. That's the goal. That's the hope. So I'd like to see what we can do with that.
People can play the game. That was a good final few words there, AVRL. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and or listening if you're on Spotify or Apple Music. Appreciate you all, and we'll see you next time.